You've probably noticed this. Someone gives you advice, good advice you actually agree with, and something in you resists. Not because the advice is wrong, not because you don't understand it, but because the moment it lands, the moment someone tells you what you should do, something inside you tightens. That's not stubbornness. That's not you being difficult. That's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. And here's the thing no one tells you. The better the advice, the stronger that resistance can be. Because your brain isn't rejecting the idea. It's rejecting the threat. Here's what actually happens when someone gives you advice. Your brain receives two signals simultaneously. Signal 1, information. This might be useful. Signal 2, threat. Someone is trying to control my behavior. And that second signal, it doesn't care how good the advice is. Because your brain has a system, a very old system, that monitors one thing above almost everything else. Autonomy, your freedom to choose. The moment that freedom feels restricted, even slightly, your brain activates a defense response. Psychologists call it psychological reactance. You don't call it anything. You just feel resistant. And you might not even know why. Let's go deeper. When advice lands as a threat, and it often does, your amygdala gets involved. The amygdala is the part of your brain that processes threat. It's fast, it's automatic, and it doesn't wait for permission. Before your prefrontal cortex, the part that thinks rationally, even finishes processing the advice, your amygdala has already decided. This feels like control. And once that label sticks, your whole system responds. Heart rate increases, stress hormones release. Approach motivation kicks in. Not approach toward the advice, approach toward restoring your freedom, which often means doing the opposite. There's a cognitive bias called the backfire effect. It works like this. Someone gives you information that contradicts what you believe. Even if that information is true, even if it's backed by evidence, your brain doesn't update. Instead, you believe your original position more strongly. The correction backfires. Now imagine that happening with advice. Someone tells you to exercise more. You already know you should exercise more. But the advice feels like pressure, and instead of motivating you, it activates a psychological defense. Your brain says, I'll decide when I'm ready. And suddenly, you're less motivated than before. Not because you're irrational, because your brain is protecting something it values more than the advice itself, your sense of control. But there's another layer. Advice doesn't just threaten your autonomy. It threatens your identity. When someone gives you advice, they're implicitly saying, you don't already know this, or worse, you're not already doing this right. And your brain hears that as, you're not competent. Now, it's not just about control, it's about self-concept. Your brain activates ego defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies to protect your sense of self, rationalization, denial, projection. You don't consciously choose these, they happen automatically, and they all serve one purpose. To protect you from the feeling that you're not who you thought you were. Here's where it gets worse. Even when you accept the advice intellectually, even when you agree with it completely, you still don't do it. This is called the intention-action gap. You intend to change, you know what to do, but the behavior doesn't follow. Why? Because knowing isn't the same as being motivated. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational part, can understand the advice perfectly. But your limbic system, the emotional part, hasn't bought in yet. And here's the thing. Behavior is driven by emotion and motivation, not by logic. So you can know something is good for you and still feel zero pull toward doing it. Because the advice landed in your head, but it never reached your system. There's something else your brain is scanning for. Intent. When someone gives you advice, your brain is asking, why are they telling me this? Are they trying to help me, or control me, or prove they're smarter than me? And if the answer feels like the latter two, the advice doesn't just get resisted, it gets rejected, completely. This happens all the time. A boss gives feedback, a parent gives guidance, a partner makes a suggestion. And even if the advice is objectively useful, your brain codes it as, this person is trying to change me. And that feels like a threat to your identity. So you defend, not against the advice, against the feeling of being controlled. Here's something surprising. How much advice threatens you depends on your self-construal. If you come from an individualistic culture where autonomy and independence are prized, you're more sensitive to advice from people close to you because your identity is built on being distinct. If you come from a collectivistic culture where connection and group harmony matter more, you're less threatened by advice from your in-group because you see yourself as part of something larger. Your brain doesn't react to advice in a vacuum. It reacts based on what freedom means to you. And what freedom means depends on how you were taught to see yourself. So when advice lands badly, it's not always about the advice. Sometimes it's about what freedom and control mean to you. Now here's something strange. You can feel this resistance even when the advice isn't for you. You watch someone else get advice, unsolicited advice, controlling advice, and you feel angry. Not for yourself, for them. This is called vicarious reactance. You're experiencing the threat to their freedom as if it were yours. Why does this happen? Because your brain doesn't just protect your autonomy, it protects autonomy as a principle, especially for people you identify with. This is why watching someone get bad advice, or manipulative advice, can feel almost physically uncomfortable. Your brain is simulating the threat and reacting to it, even though it's not happening to you. So, if your brain hates advice, what actually gets through? Not force, not pressure, not you should. What works is autonomy-supportive communication. That means offering options, not orders, asking questions, not giving answers, creating space for someone to choose. Because here's the paradox. The more you let someone feel free, the more open they become to influence. It's not about removing the advice, it's about removing the threat. When advice is framed as, here's something you might consider, instead of, you need to do this, your brain relaxes. Because it's not a command, it's an offering. And offerings don't threaten freedom. Here's the deeper truth. Advice fails, not because people don't want to change, but because advice assumes the problem is information. If they just knew this, they'd do it. But most people already know. The smoker knows smoking is bad. The procrastinator knows they should start earlier. The lonely person knows they should reach out. They don't need more information. They need internal alignment. They need the advice to connect with something they already feel, something they already want. And when advice lands as external pressure, it disconnects them from their own motivation. That's the tragedy. Good advice, delivered badly, can make someone less likely to change. Not because they're stubborn, because their brain is protecting them from feeling controlled. So what do you do with this? If you're giving advice, stop trying to convince, start trying to connect. Offer, don't impose. Ask, don't tell. Make space for autonomy. If you're receiving advice, notice the resistance. Don't judge it. Ask yourself, is this advice bad, or does it just feel like control? Because once you see the mechanism, you can decide. Not based on reactance, based on what you actually want. Your brain will always protect your freedom. That's not the problem. The problem is when that protection keeps you from the change you actually need.